what's happening with midfield. There was the big links 2 days ago now to Carlos Baleba. There have been some reports from some French outlets that £104 million is the asking price. That may not necessarily be true. What is the latest that you can tell us in relation to Baleba, his potential exit, and maybe the terms of that deal?
Yeah, this was a story that we were discussing on the United stand about a week ago, and then it was broken yesterday or the day before that Manchester United had gone through intermediaries to understand the terms of the deal and ultimately whether the player is keen, whether now or in the future. And from Baleba's point of view, absolutely happy to engage with Manchester United, but you got to deal with Brighton. So the first thing on this is the CEO of Brighton, the highly respected Paul Barber, would be key to any deal. And similarly, the most influential figure in stopping a deal this summer as well. And Brighton are very much of the belief that they're honest and upfront to players, and they are prepared to let them go at some point in time, but always on their terms and often on their timescales. So we're not talking perhaps about Brentford and Johan Wissa, where the player's having to fight to leave. And that was what made the Moises Caicedo saga so unpredictable, because it was the one time when Brighton, I think, caught by surprise, had a player that didn't buy into that long-term plan of play for us now, get developed, raise in value, and then we won't unduly stand in your way. Caicedo instead in that January, when it was Arsenal and Chelsea, issued a public statement saying he wanted to leave. But you'll note, even with that public statement, Brighton said, no, you're staying until the following summer. So this is a deal, when it happens, whether now or in the future, that I'm expecting to be entirely on Brighton and Hove Albion's terms. Then we look at the numbers being banded around, and these are not acknowledged by Manchester United sources from any of their conversations. Brighton don't quote prices. Brighton don't say you can have him for this. Brighton allow suitors to engage and often bid blind. They'll have a private number. If the ballpark of that number is met, whether now, and it would be astronomical if it's this summer or in the future, they'll start having a conversation with you. Otherwise, they'll just reject it, and they'll back the fact that the player understands they will get their move eventually. So I'm not sure that Baleba would force this. And I also think you're not looking at 40, 50, 60 million. You're probably looking at Benjamin Sesko type money or more. And all I know at the moment from Brighton's point of view is they prefer to keep for another year, and they think this player is going to turn into a Moises Caicedo type valuation and profile. In other words, one day they're going to be able to get £150 million or more. So naturally, I respect other journalists. I know there's a lot of numbers banded around as to what it would take. But I can tell you, having dealt with Brighton sources many, many times over the year, offers are usually made blind by prospective buying clubs. And Brighton, whether through the media or whether directly to clubs, rarely, I repeat again a third time, rarely offer any number, offer any encouragement, offer any guidance, because Tony Bloom and Paul Barber keep what it will actually take to sell a player pretty quiet. And there are rare and only rare exceptions. So this is why I think the Baleba interest is genuine. Maybe Manchester United tries something audacious, but it's going to be really, really difficult to get him out of Brighton Football Club this summer.
And I think that's important for Man United fans to understand. I mean, it's taken me 5, 6, 7 years to explain to football fans that the basic way that newspapers portray net spend is not how clubs operate their expenditure. So you probably find people will ignore that part. Oh, I read in this publication that it's 85 million, Terry. It has to be. But as you've said, and I've corroborated, after you said that, I started reaching out to some Brighton fans. And I was told by one Brighton fan who's very close to their club that lots of people internally in the club don't know what the price would be. It's even kept within a very finite group of people internally so that it doesn't get leaked. And it's a very difficult club to deal with. And I think we spoke about this yesterday on the United stand. I think what's important for Manchester United is to remain respectful. Yes, you want to convince the player to leave. And I no disrespect to Brighton, I don't think that would be difficult for Man United to do. But we need to go about this in the right way, because love or loathe him, Tony Bloom is an animal when it comes to negotiations, and he won't be pushed up. He will not be intimidated by the name Manchester United by any in any way, shape, or form. So we need to we need to manage that very, very well. Are there any? Has anything else come out? I know we spoke yesterday, but a different audience, I suppose. Are there any other names of midfielders that are sort of being pushed around? I know that the links to midfielders for Man United have been quite sparse this summer. Has anything else come out in the last couple of days through your conversations about alternatives to Baleba?
Nothing major, really. And obviously, if they want Baleba and they can't get him this summer, then they may wait and you may stock up a bit of budget. This is why Liverpool are having such a phenomenal and big spending window, because they've been able to stockpile, save up money. When they put that money down for Moises Caicedo, who went to Chelsea, when they tried for Romeo Lavia, yeah, they brought in some midfielders, but they also saved a lot of budget. So I think Manchester United will now be looking at their windows collectively and planning ahead. And you don't, if you're prepared to put serious money down for Baleba, whether you succeed or fail, just go and spend that money on someone else to get now. You might be a bit more patient because you might need that budget in 12 months' time. As I said many times, Wilfred Ndidi was a name. He's done a Besiktas medical now. Let's wait for the formalization there, because Valencia and other clubs were trying somehow to derail that deal. Even though he's in Turkey, he's done the medical. So my expectation is Besiktas will announce Wilfred Ndidi, but Manchester United, Everton, Valencia, Al Ahly, we're all thinking about Ndidi as a market value and a more budget opportunity. And then if you look at perhaps the sort of push from other clubs to bring in an experienced squad player, maybe Manchester United do find another economical option. So Norgard going to Arsenal is a good example of that. Not a name that would necessarily excite the fan base, but somebody that can do a job. And then you can come back again in a year's time and get the younger name and the more expensive name that you actually want without disrupting your squad chemistry. And that's kind of where we're at the moment. So you've got sort of dual midfield targets. The first is the young, ambitious player for the future. And obviously in Baleba, it's obvious that Manchester United would like to get that done. It's just incredibly difficult this summer. So let's see in the coming weeks if they can pull off an ambitious and audacious swoop, or they have to wait. Players like Ndidi will still be available late in the window. Frank Onyeka is another one, but Manchester United kind of felt he wouldn't be up to standard for what they're looking for, but he was discussed internally because, again, he's a player that's available for almost no money. Brentford are prepared to let him go, but I think you're Manchester United and you need to sign a player not just to fill a gap, but also somebody that is capable of contributing, even if they're only at the football club for a very short time. And there's just not many of these engine room midfielders out there. I also think that if they can't find, they realise that if Cunha and Mbeumo can both play at 10 or go out wide, Mason Mount can play through the centre, there is a possibility that Bruno Fernandes drops a little bit deeper. Many people have said for months that Ruben Amorim isn't a fan of Manuel Ugarte. My reporting is the complete opposite. I'm told Amorim loves Ugarte, sees him as an athlete, an engine room, and exactly the kind of profile that he thinks will fit. And obviously, Kobbie Mainoo is still expected to stay. So if they got rid of Casemiro, if they can find this budget for a midfielder, fine. And it definitely is a priority because they know eventually Casemiro is going to leave. But I don't think we're going to see a midfield panic buy. And then the last thing just to say is, at this stage of the window, if I was giving you name after name after name after name, then it would basically be clickbait without that much substance, because you only really get name after name after name before a window or early in a window when there's a short list of 7 that, as we saw with the Man United strikers, went from about 7 to 5 to 3 to 2 and finally Benjamin Sesko. You'll only really see a pivoting between 2 or 3 names and a few surprises in the last week or so of the window. But most clubs have got a really clear picture of maybe their 1, 2, and 3. And that's why I think we're in a bit of a lull in the window, even though it's incredibly busy, where there's not as many new links. And that is just the reality of journalism. It may not sell as many clicks or headlines, but if Man United had 7 midfield targets now, you'd be thinking, what have they been doing for the whole summer? Because the whole point at this stage of the window is they'll have a top priority that they can try for in Baleba, ambitious, hold the talks, understand the lay of the land. And then you might have to pivot to someone with proven Premier League experience that's a little bit older, a little bit more short-termist. If they can't pull that off, then ultimately you have to move on, close the window and be happy with the business that you've done. And this is the stage of the window that we're at. That's the reality. And that's why there's a whole lot less names being linked with every football club.
And that makes, for me, a perfect amount of sense, because I think that we're in this sort of situation where I don't necessarily want to be linked to 20 or 30 players, because it should be, we know who and what our main targets are. Some for this summer, and if not, then you wait to January or you wait to the following summer. There'll be new names that are added to it. You don't want to be delving too far down that list, and we've done that before. You know, we want this midfielder, we want that midfielder, can't get them. We end up pivoting in a new direction, or we buy someone that's substandard. They don't end up being good enough. We're lumbered with them. So look, I like that approach. It's always going to take years to fix us, so that makes sense. There was one other report about Manchester United, actually, that I wanted to get your view on, that Rasmus now and a potential exit for him.
Yeah, Rasmus Højlund is available, and we know that in the Benjamin Sesko talks, he was discussed by Leipzig, but those talks were not acknowledged on the Højlund side. And I think Rasmus Højlund, if he is to leave Manchester United, needs to be told directly or surplus to requirements. And I think that might happen because Joshua Zirkzee is expected to stay. And Manchester United also want the money in, because these outgoings for Rasmus Højlund and Alejandro Garnacho are going to be really important, because if you add the two up, it could be the best part of 100 million or somewhere close. Garnacho's valuation is 50 million. Chelsea hoping to get a deal done for less. We heard some reports a couple of weeks ago that Rasmus Højlund could be sold for 30 million pounds. I'm actually told by Manchester United sources that that number is 40 million pounds. And at the moment, with 2 years in and I think 3 years remaining of his contract, the book loss or valuation at the moment, if they let him go for nothing, would be 43 million. So if they sell him for 40 million, it's only a book loss of 3 million. And I think that's palatable as far as Manchester United's books are concerned. So there could be a very real possibility that Rasmus Højlund goes, even though we should stress and be fair to the player that he said he wants to stay and fight for his place. Leipzig is not, I think, a front runner, solely because if they did think they could get that done, it probably would have advanced concurrent to the Benjamin Sesko talks. And I know it might sound odd to say, because obviously Manchester United have got no European football and Leipzig have got no European football. So when I say Rasmus Højlund wants European football, if he stays and fights for his place at Man United, he doesn't have it. But naturally, you think at Manchester United, season on season on season, more seasons than not, the project will have some kind of European football, because it's Manchester United and history shows that to be the case. So Højlund's perspective is, if he goes, he has to be told directly, you're not going to get many minutes, you're surplus to requirements, we don't want you to be a backup or try and have competition to Benjamin Sesko and get minutes, because actually we rank it as Sesko 1, Zirkzee 2, and maybe even your Mbumos or your Cunha's playing at 9. I think it was Mateus Cunha in pre-season was used as a number 9. So Manchester United might make that argument, and then Højlund may soften his stance of wanting to stay at the football club. And I'm told very clearly Manchester United's preference is now to sell Højlund to try and get 40 million. And Italy is perhaps a most likely destination. Milan are the ones to watch. Napoli looked earlier in the window. There's some interest from Saudi Arabia and Turkey, but I sense if Højlund is to be sold, his most likely destination, at least as it stands, will be Italy. And then let's see if any Premier League clubs come forwards, because I've got to be honest, in this inflated market where Nicholas Jackson is 80 million at the moment, Brian Mbeumo was 71. I don't think between 30 and 40 million is a particularly bad price for Rasmus Højlund. So there might even be some Premier League takers as well.
Yeah, it's one to watch. It's certainly one to watch. And I love the fact that I saw your article, as you already quoted yesterday, that United have actually upped their price. And again, these little things, well, if this player's going for that, if this player's being sold for 50, if this person's going for 70, if this person's going for 20, look at Broja. If as much as Rasmus has not been a hit for us, if you can get 20 odd million for Broja that's never fit, I think 30 million for Rasmus Højlund is a joke, if I'm being absolutely honest with you, because availability is a very important ability, because an available player will outperform a player that's injured. It's as simple and as straightforward as that. So I like the fact we've done that. Kind of sticking with Man United, but segueing slightly. Fabrizio this morning claims that the Garnacho deal with Chelsea, the personal terms element is essentially all tied up. The player has agreed to go. It's now about the clubs negotiating. What's your latest understanding of Chelsea's pursuit of Alejandro Garnacho? Is it a deal that's relatively close to a conclusion? What's your thoughts and feelings on that, Ben?
Yeah, Alejandro Garnacho, I'm expecting to join Chelsea. We heard some reports yesterday that suggested the player's got two options in mind. One is to stay at Manchester United. The other is to go to Chelsea. That's not my understanding. It's done between Manchester United and Alejandro Garnacho. Manchester United are planning on a Garnacho exit. It's pure profit on the books. Garnacho didn't enjoy playing in a central area because he wants to be a left winger. He's not getting that many opportunities there. And now through the centre, his minutes are going to be diminished because of the arrivals of Brian and Burmo and Mateus Cunha. So I'm told the player is not giving that much, if any, consideration to staying at Manchester United. Maybe you say that to an extent because if a move falls through, you don't want to have to backtrack and say you were desperate to leave the club. But my understanding is not that Garnacho is weighing up Chelsea or staying. My information is that Garnacho only wants Chelsea, and the expectation is that this deal will get done. Chelsea have been quite smart. They've left it until late in the window after Benjamin Sesko, especially if United also want to add a midfielder and a goalkeeper. They know outgoings are going to be important. And like I said before, Garnacho reflects very favourably on the books. So at the moment, we have a goal from valuation. As I broke exclusively yesterday morning, the formal club-to-club talks have now started. So this could move very quickly.